Good morning. Welcome to the Celtic Way Morning Briefing Live. It's Friday, September the 23rd. I'm Tony Haggerty, a Haggerty10 Twitter handle, which you all know by now. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined today by the wonderful Alan Morrison from the Celtic by Numbers podcast. And if you've never seen Alan before, you're in for a real treat. Alan's going to go into a deep dive and statistical analysis and break down the data of Celtic's season so far, the 10 games. So welcome, Alan. It's good to see you again, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Tony. Thanks for having me on. Always a pleasure.
Yes, indeed. Now, me and Alan like to do the juxtaposition of the eye test and the data test, don't we, Alan? It's always great, and Alan educates me big time on certain things that I don't see with these four eyes. But first things first, I'll draw your attention to the strap line going across the bottom. You know what I'm going to say. Subscribe to the Celtic Way. It's £1 a month. Sorry, £1 for 2 months of full access. You hit that subscribe button, www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. Now, Alan, you have a general rule of thumb where you said it became, talking off air there, it just kind of came about by accident, not really by convention, but 900-minute mark is where you kind of do your statistical analysis and do your deep dive into the data. And it's basically 10 games, isn't it? And that's how you kind of run with these things, and it gives you a kind of accurate reflection of the stats that you were telling me about.
Yeah, that's right. The sort of 900-minute rule, if you want to sort of call it that, is quite useful. I mean, so when you're obviously looking at data, one of the main considerations is what sample size is really going to give me a meaningful amount of data to draw sort of conclusions, and really just by trial and error. And obviously, because I collect my own data, right? So I have done for the last 8 seasons. And the reason, and just to explain a little bit of that, so to go off on a bit of a tangent, but it's probably for those that are not familiar with the world of football data, it's a growing thing, right? So some people say to me, well, why do you collect your own data? You can get it off of FOTMob, you can get it off of StatsBomb or Opta. You can subscribe to Scout or StatsBomb, etc. There's various free data, FBref. FOTMob, SofaScore would be sort of free sources, and then you could subscribe to things like Scout and StatsBomb. Right, so there's various sources you could get your data. So why bother going to all of the time and effort to collect your own? And the reason for it is because when I started, that option wasn't available, and B, actually the more data that's available in the public domain, the more you realise the inconsistencies there are in terms of how people define certain things. So what's a tackle, what's an interception, etc. What are they counting when they're counting completed passes? Are they counting throw-ins and corners and free kicks? And every single data provider has got a different XG model and all those sort of things. And also, all the different providers have different people collecting the data. And very much, it's an interpretation of what you've just seen as to how you tag that data as to what sort of event it is that you've seen. So the reason that I continue to collect my own data is because it gives me a consistency that allows me, therefore, to benchmark and to test players against each other that play for Celtic. So I can look at Dembele's data versus Edouard's data versus Kyogo's data, and it's all been collected on the same basis, it's all been collected using the same models, all been collected using the same set of definitions. So you can come up with an accurate comparison, which I think is what a lot of us want to do. They want to know, well, God, is Kyogo better than Edouard? Those are the questions. No, but those are the questions as fans that we have, and those are the sort of things that we seek to answer. So the 900-minute mark was just something that I came across because when I looked at a player, and it just occurred to me that once you'd gathered about 900 minutes of data on that player, you pretty much what you're seeing doesn't change hugely. There's obviously exceptions to that. Form goes up and down and so forth, and players do develop. But 900 minutes gives you a pretty good snapshot of what a player is. So that's one. As I say, what I found also is that across people who do the same sort of stuff as I do, 900 minutes has become an almost accepted industry standard, if I can use that term, as being the sort of minimum that you need to really have a meaningful sample. So very long answer. Sorry about that, but I just wanted to give that background to people who maybe not involved in data and numbers and analytics. Just to give a little background as to the sort of the reason I do what I do. And also how the industry is growing and developing. And as I say, if people are interested in this, you don't have to read my stuff. Go to FBref, go to SofaScore, go to to FOTMob. You can scrape data, and you can do this. Anyone can do this sort of thing, really.
The retro show, lots of love coming in for you, Alan. Welcome, Alan. Love listening to one of the best stats guys in the business here.
Very kind.
Yes, indeed. And there's Frank Brennan comes in, the acceptable face of statistics and data is our very own Alan Morrison, and Kieran 5491. Oh, thank the Lord, a guest appearance who actually has football insight instead of blabbering on about trite Celtic aphorisms, Alan. There you have it, Alan.
Yeah, Kieran, give it another 10 minutes. I might get there with
I tell you what,
aphorisms.
I'll just disappear. You can talk, and then I'll come back on and wrap it all up here, because I think they're here to listen to you. No, there you go. Now, Alan, we know each other from other podcasts as well, so we got on well. Now, Alan, I'm going to ask you, so in the 10 games that Celtic have played so far, if you want to go into some kind of a deep dive, what's been the biggest takeaways from it, that statistically, that you have found from it, just to give people a flavour for this 10-game period in particular? And obviously it's a handy one to have, because the international break has just arrived upon us, so it's a good jumping off point, isn't it, for where Celtic are this season?
It is, and having just explained the sort of 900-minute 10-game kind of rule, I will also add that context is everything, right? So if you look at Celtic's fixtures, we've had home games against Aberdeen, Hearts, and the Rangers, but we've also had Champions League games against the European champions, and a tough game in Donetsk. So if you look at the context of the fixtures, you have to bear that in mind. I'm not saying whether that's harder or easier than previous seasons. I'm just saying have that in your mind when you're thinking about what this means. So to answer your question more directly, then, so I think I've looked more deeply initially at our attacking outputs in those 10 games, and actually there should be an article. I think is it going up today? I don't know.
We'll get up today, Alan.
Okay.
Certainly, if not today, it'll certainly be up tomorrow. So yeah, that's sort of one I was particularly referring to about improving. Yeah.
So just a little taster for that, going up on the Celtic Way today or tomorrow. I looked at the sort of 10 games in terms of just our goal production, really. So very basic sort of stuff, and I think it's generally it's a good news story, right? So yes, we're scoring more goals obviously than last season. I think which is great. We scored 2.28 goals a game last season. It's up to 3 this season, right? Now, those who might have seen me before will tell you, goals are obviously what we all want to see in real life. But in terms of assessing performance, and in terms of thinking about predictability, and by predictability I mean, is the way that we're performing today or in the last game, how well does that predict how we're going to play in the future? Expected goals is far better at predicting the future performance. So if you dig into the expected goals, again, it's a good story. So we're overperforming on goals scored. We're scoring 3 a game, but our expected goals is about 2.8. So a little bit of overperformance there. So, and what you'd expect over a long period, and by a long period I mean it could be even more than a season, is that your expected goals and your goals will tend to sort of come together at some point and kind of more or less equal each other. That would be the trend, certainly, unless you've got exceptional players. And in the context of Scottish football, Celtic probably do. So overperformance may not be a huge surprise. So we are our expected goals is actually up from last season. So that's good. That is good news. So we're creating better quality chances, and we're scoring more goals, and that's over, including games against even the last 3 games where we've only scored 1 goal. So that's very, very encouraging. And in terms of what's underneath that? Why is that happening? It doesn't happen by accident. And a couple of things to point out that Celtic are doing better. One of them is that we're simply taking more shots. So that's always good. It's the old sort of if you don't buy a ticket kind of analogy. So more shots. And again, listen, one thing I always stress on these sort of shows is, if I tell you that the number of shots we've taken has gone up from 17.4 to 18.8, you're probably sitting there thinking, well, that doesn't sound like an awful lot, really. But if you think about that over a season, that's quite a lot more shots, right? That's about 60, 70. What's more, it's about 70, 80 more shots that we're taking over a season. So it is significant. I mean, in professional sport, in any sort of professional sport, small margins really matter. So if you're improving by what seems like a small margin, you take that, especially in a short period of time, like we're talking about. So number of shots is up, but even more importantly for me is that the number of shots that we're taking inside the penalty box is also going up from 11.4 to 12.6. So more shots being taken, but more shots being taken from better positions, i.e., inside the box as opposed to outside. And guess what? We're producing, better quality shots. And actually, we're also executing better as well. So we're becoming more accurate. So the number of shots on target has gone up from 36 to 39%, and we're converting at a better rate. So last season we converted, 13% of all shots that we took. This season it's 16. So if you're taking more shots and you're converting more of them, then that's clearly a virtuous thing. And again, you might think, well, why is that? And really, and this is where I move away from the data to more sort of interpretation. And my interpretation would be that clearly you've got a team now that is more coherent in terms of its understanding. The team hasn't had a massive overhaul from January to now in terms of personnel. A few people have been added in, but they've not had as many minutes. We generally started the team with pretty much the first 11 that finished last season, and with a full summer and without a sort of stressful European qualifying campaign, and with no midweek games in the first sort of 4 or 5 weeks of the season, we've had lots of time on the training ground. And I think what we're seeing now is a cohesion and an understanding. The attacking patterns are better, and you can see that with your eyes, right? You see that players are the movement is coordinated, the overloads are coordinated, the timing of the movements is better. Now I know none of that happened on Sunday, and that does happen, and there are reasons for that. But generally speaking, I think what we're seeing is really this Ange ball manifesting into what you get when you've got a settled team with players that he thinks can execute to his plan, and an increased level of understanding. And it manifests itself in better chances being taken from better positions, and therefore more goals being scored.
Now, the Retro Celtic's got a question for you, Alan, but I don't know if you have the answer to this. Great, Alan. So why are our strikers missing sitters than scoring? More sitters than scoring. There you
go. Yeah, I mean, look, I think as Celtic, as fans of any football club, and I'm no different, you always think your strikers should score more than they do, and you always think that every goal that you concede, was avoidable, right? And every time you have a corner, you should score a goal. It's these are things that all football fans think, including me when I'm watching the game live, right? What I look at is the underlying data, and I look at expected goals, and it's like, luck plays a huge part in football. It's a low-scoring sport, and we saw that a little bit on Sunday. Not to take anything away from St Mirren, they played remarkably well. Their game plan was executed to perfection. But if you look at the two goals, the first one comes about because the ball hits Maida in the chest and ricochets straight to their centre forward to lay into the path perfectly to someone to cross and to score. And then the second one, is a foul on Welsh that gets missed. So I'm not saying that as an excuse for Sunday. I can equally point out where Celtic have had fortunate goals, by the way. What I'm pointing out is that football is a bit of a lucky game. So coming back to that question, why do our strikers keep missing sitters? We are, as I've said to you, we are actually outperforming our expected goals, right? So we're scoring 3 goals a game, but the expected goals model suggests we should only be scoring 2.8 goals a game. So we're actually overperforming. We're actually scoring more than what the XG model would suggest. So I would actually refute that observation.
Now, Alan, those goal statistics that you've pointed out, does that also measure up in terms of performance then? Has there been increased levels of performance? Are Celtic playing better? Have they improved in that sense?
So it's how do you define our Celtic playing better? So our Celtic playing better is a very broad topic. So indeed, so I don't want to scare people, but the number of data points that I've got across the team is frightening. So you'd have to, and I've only looked at the attacking ones, right, for the Celtic Way article. I'm going to look at the defensive ones next week. But to answer that question, I think I've addressed that. I think from an attacking perspective. So expected goals is, I would say it's certainly, it's not in the mainstream, but it's certainly hovering around the edges of the mainstream. I mean, the BBC report it on Match of the Day. They never talk about it. They never discuss it, and it never gets mentioned. But it's there on the screen. And if you notice on Sky, they also have got expected goals in their sort of stat box that they put up now.
Yeah.
So that's progress. So expected goals is probably as close to an industry standard for an advanced metric that tells you about that sort of performance in terms of chance creation. If I were to answer your question in the broadest sense, I'd be looking at all sorts of things. I'd be looking at, so you start at the bat with defend. Well, you look at the goalkeeper, because that's a unique set of skills. You look at the defending data. You look at the ball progression data. You look at the attacking data. I've looked at the attacking data. Based on that, I think we are definitely improving. I think defensively as well. What I will say overall, especially domestically, and I know Sunday was an exception to this, but especially domestically, what Ange has done over a year now, over 39 games, whatever it was, is there's a consistency of underlying performance data. And what I mean by that, if I can boil that down to a couple of things, one is the difference between expected goals we expected to score and expected goals expected to be conceded. That expected goals difference is consistently between 1.5 and 2. Now, if you're consistently between 1.5 and 2 expected goals better than your opponent in terms of chances created, that leaves you quite a large buffer for unexpected things to happen, bad luck, bad decisions, etc. And it almost it eradicates some of the we call it variance, if you like, from the actual outcome. And what we've seen, how does that manifest itself? It's manifested itself in 38 games unbeaten, scoring lots of goals and not conceding very many. So to me, that shows a team that's improving and that is playing with increased coherence. Now, we're on a bit of a bad run. We haven't won in 3. We've only scored 1 goal, and we had an absolutely shocking performance on Sunday. So, the next question is, is that what is the real Celtic at the moment? Is it that last game, or on the basis that you're only as good as your last game, or is it what we've seen building up over the last 38 games? And that, with my analyst head on, it's to me, it's more likely to be what we've seen growing over the last 39 league games. So long-winded answer. I've not looked at all of it, but I would say cautiously, yes, we are improving.
I told you this guy's good, didn't I, Troops? He makes it sound very interesting. I'm a recent convert to the statistical data, and Alan will tell you that, but yeah, he makes it sound very, very interesting. He breaks it down in a language that we can all understand. I think that's the bottom line. Now, David Bradley Allen says he wants Georgios Giakoumakis to start games. Is there a case for the big man to start games, Alan?
I think there is, in the sense that he's no worse than what we actually, in terms of, he brings different skill set obviously to Kyogo, but again, his underlying performance data is remarkably consistent. He's actually got a far higher expected scoring contribution. So expected scoring contribution, like little sidebar, expected goals we've talked about, plus expected assists. So how many goals are you expected to score? How many goals are you expected to create for others? Add the two together is your expected scoring contribution. And since Giakoumakis has been at Celtic, that has been consistently over 1 throughout his time at Celtic, which means that every game you expect him to either score a goal or create an assist. That's a pretty impressive record. And this season, on a tiny sample, he's played the equivalent of 4.3 full games. His expected scoring contribution is actually 1.2, and Kyogo's is 0.83. So you might argue on that basis that actually he does deserve to be ahead if you just looked at that one metric. So I think for me, there's obviously a lot more factors to bring into that conversation. I think we'd all agree that Kyogo is probably the superior technical player, but Giakoumakis has got a very specific skill set that is very, when used correctly, makes him a very dangerous forward. And actually, I think in some games this season, I would argue that his in European games when he's come on, his his build-up play, like for example even in the Derby game, his ability to take the ball in under pressure and then just lay it off, that sort of classic centre forward type play, which we've not seen from him, because although he's a strong, he's not particularly tall, but he's a very strong guy. He really does his best work in the penalty box, and you really don't want him trying to build the play outside, because he looks like the proverbial baby elephant with the beach ball, trying to juggle it in a phone box type of thing. So I think he has improved in that regard, and I have no sort of worries if he starts ahead of Kyogo. But I think you have to look at other factors, look at the opposition as well. And would he have been a better bet to start on Sunday? Easy in retrospect to say, but I think at least he would have given them a bit more of a physical challenge, and sort of disrupted them a little bit more than what we did.
Well, he got the 2 headers in.
He had the best chance.
He had the best chances. So that maybe, as you say, hindsight's a great thing. Now there's a real Friday 11 going on with Kieran 5491 with you, Alan. Could listen to this guy read off the ingredients on a bottle of shampoo. There you go.
Very interesting what goes into shampoo. If you just
yes, indeed. Now, Alan, I was making the point the other day, and I kind of disagreed strongly, that Ryan Stevenson came out and said that he thought Stephen Kingsley was a better player than Greg Taylor. And I thought, well, Friday, I'll ask you, because you have data for Greg Taylor. Now, surely my eye tests, the old Groucho Marx joke, who are you going to believe, me or your own eyes? But my eyes haven't deceived me with Greg Taylor, are they? Greg Taylor's a footballer, and he's a player that's playing at the top of his game, is he not?
I think so. So listen, I'll be on record in some different podcasts. If you watch the Huddle Breakdown, which I recommend that you do, please subscribe. My view on Taylor over the last 2 years has been relatively consistent in that I've always said, here's a player who you'd want another 10 of him in terms of his attitude, his attitude to his work, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the boy absolutely wants to be the best he can be, and is doing everything to try and get there. And that you cannot criticize that. He's got a fantastic attitude. My concern has always been that he has certain physical limitations, and possibly to some extent technical limitations, which I didn't see would ever scale to being effective at the highest level, which we're now seeing at Champions League level. And that was mainly around a couple of things. One is just physicality, so athleticism. He's a small person, which is fine. I'd have a team of 11 Xavis, rather than 11 Lyndon Dykes, for example. But and that's fine if you're compensating with like great speed, etc., and good core strength and balance, which means that you can, even if you're small, you don't get knocked off the ball easily. And I didn't think he had any of those things. Whereas you can see someone who had a tremendous attitude, a tremendous work ethic, a tremendous thirst for knowledge and to get better as a player, how is he ever going to overcome those physical limitations? And it manifests itself in terms of ability to get past a man when offering a threat in the attacking third, and it manifests itself even more importantly in recovery runs back into defence when Celtic lose the ball, because obviously the fullbacks often do play either inverted or high, depending on the situation of the match. So, having said all that, and I still maintain those things to have been true at the time, what I will say is that the boy continues to develop. He's a young player, right? Continues to grow and continues to improve, and has done, I would say, this season. And if anything, I think. And I'm going to pick out him and Tony Ralston. I know we've not seen a lot of Ralston this season, but I think what my eyes tell me is that they're both a few kilos lighter, and they've both gained a little bit of sharpness to compensate for that lack of basic innate pace through being that little bit lighter, that little bit more agile. Now Taylor's an incredibly fit guy, right? I loved the bit he did during lockdown. Or after lockdown, I can't remember. They did one of these Celtic TV little jokey things that they do when they interview players in pairs, sort of thing. And it emerged that Greg Taylor is actually and this was him saying it, so I don't know if it's true. It could be just footballer BS, you know what I mean? But essentially to kind of amuse themselves during lockdown, they'd had a sort of daily 5K challenge. They were all doing a 5, or some of them, I don't know how many, were doing a 5K every day, and then obviously a little bit of a leaderboard and all that sort of thing. And he was actually the best at that, which I thought was pretty impressive. And I think he mentioned his quickest time for a 5K. So those of you that do park run, you'll understand that if I see that Greg Taylor was doing part run in 16.16, 16 minutes, 16 seconds, you'll know that's pretty damn impressive. I mean, we have young kids doing our part run, and if you get sort of 18 minutes, you're thinking, wow, that's incredible. So 16 minutes. I know he's a professional athlete, but footballers aren't built for long distances in that sense.
Yeah.
So anyway, listen. Long story short is, this is a guy he's doing out of his way. He has got a great engine. He has got natural fitness, and he has got an amazing attitude. And he's absolutely maxing out his ability to be a top-level professional footballer. And I think you just got to love him. You've got to absolutely love him for what he's doing. And if you look at his numbers this season, they're pretty good. He's probably after Jens actually, and Hatate and McGregor. He has the most what I call pack passes. These are passes that take opponents out of the game, forward passes. So he's great at that. He's also great at the other end of that, and he in terms of getting on the ball, he's easily the best sort of defensive player in terms of getting on the ball on the other end of forward passes. Him and Juranovic have both got very similar rates of chances created. I think it's 1.9 a game for Juranovic, 1.7 for Taylor. I think somebody put up some stats on from, I think it might be Y Scout, showing that Taylor was like third on the list for chances created in the league this season after O'Reilly and Turnbull, and he was ahead of Tavernier and Barisic. And if you think of their team, they almost wholly rely on their fullbacks for chance creation, and Taylor's actually outperforming both of them in terms of number of chances created, and also secondary assists. So secondary assists are the pass before the pass that sets the chance up. So that sort of establishing pass, as some people call it. So long story short, again, I think he's improved another notch. I think he's improved his physicality another notch. And listen, if he continues to defy me, especially, then I'm absolutely delighted. And just what an attitude! What an attitude!
I couldn't tackle a bowl of special K, never mind a 5K. You know what I mean? So these kind of things make me sick. But hey, that's the problem of getting old, isn't it? The retro Celtic comes in and says if Kieran Tierney goes to Greg Taylor for advice, and I think that's all we need to know, referencing the fact that Kieran Tierney had spoken to Greg Taylor about playing the inverted fullback position and bigged him up and said he was really impressed by his performances, and that is quite a compliment to Greg Taylor, isn't it? That someone as established as Kieran Tierney would ask him his advice about that.
Absolutely, and maybe also the fact that I know we've not seen a lot of Bernabei yet, but he's a young guy that's come in. Clearly has a different. If you think about all of Taylor's weaknesses, Bernabei appears to have those in spades. In the sense he's quick, he's aggressive, he's got a nice sort of robust physique about him, even though he's not particularly tall. But maybe that's another factor in spurring Taylor on, and to get any praise from Tierney, because Tierney's an elite level defender. Especially I think he at Celtic he had a lot of attacking to do, and he was pretty good at it. But really, what people didn't realise with Tierney is first and foremost he was just a great defender. And that was his core skill set.
I mean, the 10 games, the 900-minute mark have come and gone. I mean, the progress report, if you were to grade it as a teacher, what would you say? B plus, A minus, something like that, or room for improvement? Always room for improvement, isn't there, with Celtic,
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you know, Tony, and I know you're sort of goading me a little bit here because I hate to sort of produce these marks out of 10, whatever. But I'll play. It's your show, and you're the host. I should be polite and play along. So if I was grading it, I would have been like, oh, if it was like an English essay that you'd submitted, I'd have been absolutely bowled over by the opening paragraph. I'd have got really excited about as the second act unfolded, and then I think you've just got a little bit cliched in the last in the last day, gone a bit EastEnders, And so I would probably give you a B plus at this stage because we left £1 million on the field in Warsaw and two Champions League points. We learned a harsh lesson against Real Madrid, and no shame in that. But what you'd want to leave room for in the grading is have you learned from those lessons? Have you learned how to pace yourself better? Have you learned how to press more effectively and efficiently over a 90-minute game, not a 50, 60-minute game? Can you take your chances under pressure like we should have done in Warsaw? And then, the manager has to take Sunday, on the chin, as they say, and learn about, what is the appropriate setup for the team against these types of opposition, because he's always saying, we expect to play each team at their best, and that was St Mirren at their absolute best, and we were nowhere near them in terms of just matching their organisation, intensity, shape, structure, spacing, desire. Those things were all lacking. So it started off absolutely amazing, on for an A star. We're currently on a B plus, but I think we'll be back in A territory by the end of the season.
I'm glad it wasn't Baldrick's German Guns poem and Blackadder. Started off badly, tailed off towards the middle, and the least said about the ending, the better. We don't want one of those kind of seasons, Alan. But I'm sure you agree. I'm sure you'll agree, ladies and gentlemen. I could talk to this guy all day. You could probably listen all day. But sadly, kind of half an hour has come and gone, and it's flown in. Alan, I can only thank you. That's wonderful. I love these chats. It's always enlightening for me, and it's always enlightening for the supporters. Thanks, guys, for the comments, and we'll try and get Alan on regular if we can. If Alan will be accessible and agree to that, then we'll maybe get him on more, and we can talk about that. But excellent, Alan. Thank you for your contribution. Always enjoy it. And thanks, guys, as I say, for the comments in the comment section. Real love for you out there, Alan. You're doing something right.
Thanks ever so much for having me on, Tony. It's a real pleasure. Thanks for the questions and the kind comments as well. Thank you.
And I'll just remind you all again, you know what I'm going to say. Subscribe to the Celtic Way. You can read wonderful articles by Alan and some by myself as well, now and again. You can subscribe to the Celtic Way, supporting top quality journalism, covering the club you love. You know what I'm going to say. £1 for 2 months of full access to the podcast, everything that's written on the website. Hit that button, www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe. I want to thank Friday's guest, the wonderful Alan Morrison. You can find Alan on the Huddle Breakdown and at Celtic by Numbers as well. Alan, thank you very much for that, mate. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Tony. Cheers, pal.